Hey everybody, welcome to something a little bit different on the channel. Today I'll be doing a Trails tier list video as I'll be going through all the games that I've played and just honestly just giving my thoughts and opinions on them and to kind of just generate some discussion. A few things to go through before we start. Number one, I have not played through Kiseki, so don't worry, that will not be discussed throughout this video. Two, I will be talking about major spoilers in each game. Nothing should cross between titles though, so I will be timestamping the titles below, so you can just jump from title to title, whatever suits you. And lastly, just a reminder again that this is just my opinion again, so don't feel like this is some factual tier list where, you know, this game is ultimately the best game ever and anyone disagrees is wrong. It's not that, it's just again my personal tier list. Without further ado, let's start the tier list. So let's begin with Trails in the Sky FC, and now I'm going to be putting this into B tier, and this is going to act as kind of like the bar baseline tier for the series. It's a great game, and it's nothing insane for me, nor is it anything bad. It's just a good solid game. Now I think a lot of people complain or don't like FC because of the slow burn and the pacing. I personally think it's fine and appropriate for the kind of game, you know. It's just a game featuring Estelle and Joshua as they basically go on an adventure to become bracers and just solving, you know, crisis to crisis, you know, starting with Cassius going missing and then, you know, the Sky Bandits in Bose. And this eventually leads to stopping Richard at the end, which I think is great. It's a really cute story and it's appropriate. I really like the dynamic between Estelle and Joshua. Joshua being kind of the smarter of the two, more professional you could argue, and always bails Estelle out when she's in a little bit of a pickle you could argue. And this transitions very well to the next game, which I'll discuss then. Some of my favorite characters I think of the cast, Chloe. I like Chloe a lot. I think her progression and character development gets a lot better as well. And Zin. I know Zin is a bit of an underrated one, but I think he's kind of solid as kind of a more mature and someone in the party that's a bit more experienced than the others, even though you have characters like Shahrazad and Agate that can kind of fill the same role. In terms of gameplay in FC, I think the gameplay is decent enough, you know, for being what it is. You know, arts will still always be the best in the Sky games. I wish the crafts were a little bit better, you know, especially like Estelle. Her crafts are honestly mostly terrible, besides like Motivate, I think it's called. I think in terms of music, FC has a solid track. Silver Wool is probably one of my favorite tracks, so shout out to that. And I will definitely talk about the ending as well, which I think a lot of people enjoy the most about FC. It's really well done and it just leaves you with more questions than answers. You know, thinking about what happens to Joshua later, you know, Ouroboros being a new thing, and will Estelle end up, you know, getting Joshua back, etc., which leads really well into the next game, which is why I think overall, I think Trails in the Sky does go into B tier for me. So the next game up is obviously the sequel, Trails in the Sky SC. I'm gonna put this into S tier as I feel this is peak fiction. I think the first thing I want to talk about is kind of the development of Estelle. As we know from FC, she's kind of a bit of that clumsy character, a bit loud as well. And in this game, when she doesn't have Joshua and can't rely on him, she then ends up kind of stepping into that role and becomes a lot more mature herself. And then obviously is the one to help bring him back in a sense. So it's a really, again, great development of the dynamic between those two into SC as well. Overall, I really like the game in general. There's only really one downside that I want to maybe just briefly discuss, which was Chapter 8. I think with the stakes being so high around that point and, you know, the stories, you know, the pace has gone a lot faster there. Chapter 8 does feel like things have slowed down a little bit. I don't hate it, you know, I still played through it and it was fine. But I do wish, you know, in some of these high climax moments, we just get to the main story a bit faster and just, you know, get stuff done. Again, in terms of gameplay, nothing much different. I know we get a few more arts and some new characters are playable as well, which is cool. I will say again, in terms of music, so Super Will, you know, you got the super range version playing in the OP and the instrumental in some parts, really cool. I will say in SC, the reason I guess it's an S tier is that there's a lot more peak moments, a lot more really cool moments, things that paid off since FC. You know, we have the 1v1 between Luve and Josh. You know, the reveal of Kevin, you know, near the end where Iceman gets his downfall. We had that part where I think Joshua breaks through his stigma. That was also really cool. I also enjoyed how like a lot of your party members have this small rivalry with some enforcers from Ouroboros. That also gave them some character development, as you know, some of them were linked towards them, you know, with like Sherazad and Zin. But yeah, I think SC is just really good. There's just so many high moments. Even kind of like when I had the fight between Nage and Luve, the dragon and Tita kind of coming in. A lot more characters I think got developed and, you know, changed my opinion of them since FC as well. So I think that's why, again, for me, SC goes into S tier. It's just really solid, and again, shout out to FC for making SC so good. Alright, now moving on to Trails in the Sky, the third. This one is going to be tucked into A tier, just like that. I think them changing the protagonist to Kevin was really good. He was missing a lot of information, especially after the reveal of him at the ending of SC. Left a lot of questions as well. I personally think Estelle had plenty of spotlight time and it was okay for her to take a back seat. I will say Kevin's backstory was really interesting, and having a game kind of to explore that, not only about his backstory, but we also get insight into the church and how the systems work, was good. Reese being a strong support character for Kevin was also really nice. They had a really kind of cute dynamic as well. In my opinion, a lot of people who kind of either hate or love this game. It's pretty coin flip. I think it does get mislabeled sometimes as a dungeon crawler. It does sound a bit lame when you hear a game like this, but it's not really like that. It's a little bit different, I think, than just a dungeon crawler because of the door systems. Speaking about the door systems, I generally like most of them. However, the really long doors, which I believe, I actually can't remember the style of the moon doors, those ones I felt were a bit too long. You know, the one with Tita and Sherazad. Sometimes I felt like, am I even playing, you know, Sky Third? Like I'm just playing a completely different game because they were so long. But other than that, the other ones were really cool. I liked how Falcon, you know, gave some love to characters that didn't get as much development in the previous games. You know, Julia, for example, is one of them. And of course, the doors that gave a lot of foreshadowing into the future series. Those were really cool as well. I personally think out of the three Sky games that this game has the best soundtrack as well. There was just so many bangers after another. The reason I guess it's not S tier, I think for me, is that it's just a little bit different, and I kind of wish also the game did a little bit more in terms of the sandbox kind of theme of the epilogue games. I wish I could do more with the gang, you know, after the story, or even, you know, before we tackle the final boss, to kind of just get that little bit of love to all the characters just one last time before we say goodbye. It was fun to also play as Ren and Richard in this game as well, since they were like insanely broken as well. I do say it was really cool, again, just to reiterate how Kevin as a character developed and how he saw his kind of, I guess, tragic past and how he got over it as well, all in one game. And I will say the final goodbye at the end of this game was just so sad, because who knows if we would see these characters again. And that is why I believe Sky Third goes into A. It is just pretty solid. You gotta play it. There's so much info about it, and it just doesn't beat those peak moments like in Sky SC, but still solid enough. So moving on to the crossbow duology, we have Trails from Zero, and I'm putting this in A tier, just above Sky Third. Now I want to talk about kind of the cast of Lloyd and the SSS. I think this cast is really solid. The fact that they're just made of 4 members means they have a lot more dynamics and quirks between each other, which means I see kind of more of a closer and tighter squad in a sense, which make them a lot more likable for me. I will say, kind of similar to Sky FC, game is really solid for kind of like an intro setup game. I do feel like this story in Zero is a lot more rounded, you could argue, especially because it doesn't end with a cliffhanger as well. I do like the kind of plot point where the SSS and the police force in Crossbell are kind of like the underdogs. You know, we played 2 games, you know, in Sky FC and SC where we're like the bracers, and now we're kind of, you could argue, going against them slightly. And even with Crossbell being kind of an underdog between, you know, the 2 giants of Erebronia and Calvard. So it was cool to have that kind of dynamic gameplay from a story point of view as well when we're playing as the SSS. I will say Zero has some really good tracks as well. Some of my favorites are Get Over the Barrier, you know, that being as a battle theme. Like, oh my gosh, I would like to fight over and over again with that playing in the background. And obviously Inevitable Struggle, you know, that moment near the ending, you know, where they're defending the IBC, that there was really good. In fact, I think that scene near the end where, you know, the Crossbell Guardian Force did end up getting drugged, it was a cool moment, you know. You could see the SSS kind of as the underdog there as well, as they were kind of overwhelmed, and then eventually being saved by Arios. Another good feature or stuff I liked about Zero was the cameos from Joshua and Estelle. This is kind of where, you know, I figured out, oh, the Trails being kind of this long series, and getting these cameos are really cool. Also like the ending where Ren kind of closes her overall character plot as well. I think Ren as a character is alright. I don't particularly like her that much, but I think it's great to see her all the way from, you know, Sky FC, as you could say, a villain and enemy, and her transitioning all the way to Zero, kind of accepting Joshua and Estella's family. Overall, again, the gameplay, I think they did a better job adding different stuff and kind of new takes and spin on the core gameplay mechanic. I think the UI changes were really good as well. So overall, I think, again, Zero is just pretty good, you know? It's not peak fiction, it's just really solid on its own, which is why it's going into Tier A. Okay, and now we're moving on to Trails to Azure, and at this point of the tier list, this is going rank 1. This is easily the best game so far. There's so much peak fiction. The story and all the events that happened were so good. You know, that chapter 4, everyone knows chapter 4, you know, where everything, it all hits you, you know. I think for me, it started kind of where you were talking to Lecter, you know, figuring out, you know, who's the one behind all of this, and it just starts clicking, and then, you know, the red constellation comes, and then Crossbell goes into flames, and then you then have the moments where you get betrayed by your close allies such as Noel and Arios, and everything just goes really wrong. And then, you know, Lloyd gets put into prison, and then, oh my god, the breakout with him and Garcia, that was great. To him meeting up with Zayt as well, and then eventually the Wazi reveal. Like, I didn't even realize, you know, the Wazi reveal was gonna come, you know, with him being a Dominion. And then you have even the Sky cameos when they were fighting back, you know, Estelle, Joshua, Ren come back, Kevin and Reese, you know, this chapter 4 and so forth was really good. Not to even mention, you know, at the final boss, you know, the reveal of what happened from Trails from Zero, like the prologue, you know, I thought, again, like, this was just meant to be like a teaser, you know, where, and not to spoil that Joshua and Estelle comes back, but no, the fact that it's actually part of the story, and then Lloyd wakes up, it's all part of, you know, everything that Kia has done. Oh my god, like, Azure, for me, is peak fiction. Like, all of these events alone really bumps it all. Again, soundtrack, pretty solid, you know, you got Mystic Core there, that's a banger when you're going up in that dungeon again. One thing to shout out, I say, is Lloyd as a protagonist. I think he's really cool, man. I'm just saying, like, he doesn't have anything special to him. He's just like a normal dude, a detective, and just to see how he, you know, gets over all the barriers and all the struggles as well as just who he is really cool as well. In terms of everything else, like, you can't go wrong when it's the Trails games. The gameplay is still good. I will say, you know, got the character development as well with the bonding system. Some of my favorite characters are like Isha, Randy, Lloyd, Tio. Like, I feel the SSS is such a tight knit pack that it's kind of hard to hate on anyone, like even Wazi as well. And yeah, and that's why Azure for me is S. There's just so many bangers that I really struggle too much to find any downsides. You have epic fights as well, you know, with Aryan Road, and when you take off her mask and then that gets revealed a bit as well. Yeah, just really solid game, really good payoff game. This is just true peak fiction, honestly. Alright, so with the crossbow duology out of the way, we're moving on to Trails of Cold Steel. Let me just move Nayuta down here. Trails of Cold Steel, I think personally for me, is B tier after Trails in the Sky. Now, I will say, you know, as a disclaimer, the Cold Steel arc is probably my least favorite, but I still really enjoyed it, just not as much as the others. I would say the first thing to point out about Cold Steel 1 is that I'm not the biggest fan of the size of Old Class 7. I think it is a little bit much. I felt like some of the characters didn't get enough spotlight and some got more than others. I feel like, like Elliot really got left in the dirt compared to others. I will say though, Trails of Cold Steel 1, the OST, there was some really good tracks as well. Glint of Cold Steel, when I first hear that at the beginning when you fight mobs, that's great. Atrocious Raid in like the prologue bit, it was so good. Like the intro really did kind of catch my hook in, especially with the tracking as well. One thing that I like to talk about is that Reen kind of being a little bit of a different MC again, like the others we've had before. And we could argue it's a little bit like Kevin, I think, slightly, but I liked it when he had his Ogre's power. It's a bit different than Estelle and Lloyd. Overall, you got the modern changes of the gameplay. I do like Link Attack. In Cold Steel, it just makes it feel like there's a bit more punch and impact with your stuff. I think craft play improved. I think it was a lot more viable, for me at least, to use crafts compared to the other games. Like art, I think are still decent, but I like using crafts, especially with like green and so on. I would say overall, in terms of the school theme, something that was okay for me. I didn't love it. The bonding events, I think personally not a fan of. But I will say, one of the big points of Cold Steel was kind of the villains as well, and obviously to the ending. Surprisingly enough, I did not figure out who Z was until kind of the last minute, where there was an NPC, I think, nearby or someone that kind of gave me a hint saying, oh, Crow went to Heimdall and left all his stuff. And at that point it clicked to me, oh, Crow's name started with a C. But I just never really figured it out because I don't know why, because you could bond with Crow, he was in your party. It just never came to me that he could potentially be Z. I always thought it was either Cedric or Claire for some reason, mostly because I was struggling on to figuring out who it was. And the cliffhanger was really good again. The stakes were high, Reen got Valimar. I was then forced to leave. You actually fight, I think it was Scarlet. You think, oh, we're fighting back, this is good, good ending. All this, and then Crow comes in and kicks your ass again, and then it's over. And then you're forced to leave with Celine, who again reveals that she's a talking cat. There's so much that happens in the ending. The reveal of Sharon, that she's an enforcer. Like, where did this come from? Again, man, Falcom and the endings and cliffhangers, there's just something with it again, which is why I think it's in B tier. It's just solid, I think, as well. I guess more talking about the main game itself, I liked again the slower pace of we're exploring Eastern Erebonia. The school study fields were cool, honestly, to see different parts as well. I think for me, I just didn't feel super attached to some of the Class 7 members, because I feel like the cast is a little bit too big. But overall, I still think Cold Steel 1 is pretty solid. To be fair, it was the title that made me want to play the Trail series in the first place, just from initial glance. So I gotta give that some sort of credit as well. Overall, again, not a terrible game, but I don't think it was exactly for me like peak fiction or something that I would really want to play again. So for me, it goes into B tier. Okay, and continuing, we have Trails of Cold Steel 2. This one's a hard one for me because I like a lot from Trails of Cold Steel 2, but there's also some things I really hate. But if I'm trying to add everything out and balance it, I think Trails of Cold Steel 2 lands maybe somewhere between top of B or bottom of A. I think I'll put it in the bottom of A because I'm feeling a bit nicer. So yeah, let's talk about it. Hold Still 2. The big gripe and the reason why I don't think for me it's maybe higher in A or even S tier, honestly, you know what, I'm actually going to put it in front of top of B. Is the pacing and certain story choices that they've decided. I'll talk about those negatives later, so let's talk about the good stuff first, because I think the ending for Cold Steel 2 and the I think is it called the I don't think it's the intermission, but you know, the crossbow section, those moments were really good. I think if they didn't exist, honestly, I would argue of putting Cold Steel 2 like bottom of B or even C. Yeah, the ending, let's talk about the ending. You know, when you get back with the fight with Crow and Beta, that was cool. A Blue Destination, man, that track, oh my god, that is a great track. And then to the point where you had to help Cedric out, and then Crow and Reen, you know, together, the duo. Then you get to play as Aldine and Crow for the first time. Then you get the combined S-Craft thing, whatever it's called, I forgot. That was really cool. And then so sad when you see that Crow basically sacrifices himself, you know, tanks the hit so Reen can end it and just save the world, or not world, but like, you know, Erebonia. And yeah, it was just really good. Then you had the reveal of Osborne for being Reen's dad, and then obviously You'll Remember Me plays, and then Crow, and then it pivots to Crossbell. The Crossbell section was so good. You know, as someone that has played the previous games, you get that you know, the prior knowledge. You had Lloyd and Risha in 3D. You had the music from, you know, the Crossbow duology, and you had a whole dungeon to play it with, you know, in kind of the Cold Steel 1-2 engine like gameplay cycle. And then eventually you have the boss fight between Reen and Lloyd, and that was, you know, I felt like for me that felt way more exciting than seeing Joshua and Estelle again in the Crossbow duology. You know, sorry if that spoiled anyone who hasn't played the Crossbow duology. I just had to really mention it. Just seeing kind of the difference between Lloyd and Reen, you know, where I believe like, Lloyd is kind of fighting for what he believes, and we all know that he's against the barriers. He's just some dude who kind of fighting for what he kind of believes in. And at that point, Reen is, you could argue that he has power, and while Lloyd doesn't have any sort of kind of external power, Reen has obviously like Valimar, his ogre form, but Reen is kind of like under orders. He's not really kind of, you could argue, fighting for what he wants, and they're both fighting, you could argue, for some similar ideals, but in kind of different ways, you know, especially at the end where Reen is kind of like, he wishes he was Lloyd in some sense. It was a really cool fight. Yeah, one of the best moments in Trails as well. I also want to mention that the intermission was a cool segment as well. It was different, you know, where Reen kind of gets, you know, brought up, you know, you talk to kind of the quote-unquote the villains of the Noble Alliance, and, you know, realize that not all of them are necessarily evil, that everyone just has like different perspective, and that kind of eventually leads Reen to accepting his ogre powers. And, you know, that scene again where I think it was, you know, Blue Destination again, he like fights Duvalie and Blue Blanc, and then eventually Crow, the 1v1. So yeah, there's a lot of good points in Cold Steel 2 which I really like, but for me what really kind of drags it down and why I don't want to kind of put it higher was Act 2. This for me, I did not really enjoy one bit. Again, I think I mentioned this kind of in Sky SC of Chapter 8, but I'm not the biggest fan of when kind of stakes start to get high and then they really drag it and slow it down. You know, for me, I didn't enjoy when I had to go and save, I think, Elliot's sister and stuff. And I understand from kind of like them as a class wanting to reunite the students, but I felt like, you know, with a civil war breaking out, with you know, war going around, it just felt slow. I kind of wanted them to just, you know, get into action, just story, go. You know, I already had Cold Steel 1 to kind of build stuff up. I want Cold Steel 2 to go fast and just get stuff done. Yeah, so I think the ending is really epic, and again, talk about Act 2 slowing it down after having the really good ending and the kind of cold steel, not cold steel, the crossbow bit. The epilogue felt really slow to me, and again, I'm kind of like, what's the point? You know, the game is feeling a bit more dragged out, and especially for me, the ending Reverie corridor, I did not really appreciate one bit. I just sped run that just so again I can get to the main story bit. I know it may seem like a lot of ranting, and again, I know people may have different opinions. I will say again, Cold Steel 2 does have a lot of very good moments, but again, I just really did not enjoy Act 2 that much. You know, I kind of wish they had something else in place of it and kept like kind of the main story going. So overall for me, that's why Cold Steel 2 goes for me just above Sky and Cold Steel 1 because I think of the really epic moments. But I think because of Act 2, I can't really put it much higher. Next up is Trails of Cold Steel 3. Now for me, I'm gonna put this at the front of top of tier A. I think this game was really solid. That's the best way to say it. I'll start off with new Class 7, I guess. I personally prefer them a lot more than old Class 7. Again, kind of similar to Zero and Crossbow. It just feels more refreshing that they're a smaller size cast. The dynamic feels strong, and I feel like as a class they feel close. And I didn't really see that with old Class 7. I even felt like new Class 7 felt good even when they added Ash and Muse to a six-man roster. I think at this point I really started to appreciate Reen as an MC more. I think his kind of story where you could argue, I wouldn't say the tragedy, but him kind of being kind of born or forced into kind of, you could say, the position he is sometimes, you know, how he has the ogre power, how he was the one that was the Ashen Chevalier, and in a sense now he's kind of working under Osborne, in a sense in a slightly forced way, especially because now it's obviously his dad, and him trying to kind of, I guess you could argue, find his purpose, and with the kind of struggle of him, the overarching arc of him being like sacrificial and wanting to help others more than himself. So I think this is where I started to like Reen a bit more. I will say with Cold Steel 3, this game does get a lot better if you've played all the previous titles, as you know, pretty much everyone recommends before you play Cold Steel 3 that you've played the prior games. It was again really cool to see Argy and Tita in like chapter 1 or wherever it was on the train with Reen. You just get really giddy about it, you know. You've seen these guys, you know who they are, their backstory, and it's like Reen's like, you know, who are you guys? You know, you guys are from Lebar, I guess, but you know more. You know what Argy and Tita's capable of, you know. I will say again, for an intro slash setup game, the pacing is good. I'd say it's very similar to Cold Steel 1. I really like the field studies as you get to explore Western Erebronia. I will say, you know, shout out to old Class 7, you know, their cameos, you get to see their outfit, how they've grown. Again, I just love it when games, you know, you get to play as or see characters from previous titles. It's one of my favorite things. In terms of gameplay, I guess I should mention it now since I forgot to talk about it, but I think Master Quartz system is kind of fun. It allows you to kind of more customize your character to what kind of playstyle you could argue, you know, evasion tank, crit, you know, hard hitting, healer, etc. And in a sense, you could pretty much make anyone who you want with Master Quartz, I guess, even if it's not optimal. In Cold Steel 3, they've added Brave Orders. Again, I think this was a fun layer of complexion to the gameplay, although I feel like in Cold Steel 3 there was definitely some broken ones, such as Sledgehammer, which kind of messed up the balance a little bit. For some people, I think they like the tracks in Cold Steel 3, but for me, this might actually be the weakest OST for me. There was not many tracks in Cold Steel 3 that I really liked. So yeah, I think personally I didn't appreciate or enjoy that much. I think obviously the one thing to talk about is the finale, the cliffhanger. Oh boy. As you spiral down the final dungeon and you fight the hard bosses again like similar to Cold Steel 2. But in this, obviously, as you fight them, you lose the party members. So you get down there, you're just down to the bare bones of New Class 7 with Altina and Ash missing. And it's just a really sad and strong finale, where Reen loses control after seeing Milliam basically die. And kind of that combat scene where you, as Reen, who has lost control, you are like forced, you as the player need to input commands for Reen to kill the holy beast, and then you essentially, as Reen, you could argue, are the one causing the Great Twilight to start as you see everything spread. And then obviously that final ending with Osborne, the end, something like something with ink, black as despair, something along those lines. Then it cuts, credit. Oh my god, what a cliffhanger. Back then when I played it, I had nothing left. I was caught up to the series, at least in terms of Western release, and I think I had to wait a year for the Cold Steel 4 English release. I don't think of playing it in Japanese or anything, but I was there like just, that meme where the guy is just sitting on the swing, just nothing. That was me. I had to wait a whole year for Cold Steel 4 to see what happened next. So that was some crazy moments. So I think overall, Cold Steel 3, I liked it a lot for an intro game. I think New Class 7 and the new Thor's Academy for the quote-unquote trash was definitely like a bit of fresh air, something different. And for me, that's why Cold Steel 3 is an A tier. It's just pretty good. So now we're at Cold Steel 4. Again, Cold Steel 4 for me, a little bit up and down, had some similar negatives to Cold Steel 2, but overall I will put this at the bottom of A tier. I will say Cold Steel 4 has some of the highest highs in the entire series, but I also think there was just some parts that I really didn't like. Let's talk about some of the big highs and why I think that's why I pushed it into a solid A tier as well. Fragments event, where you go and save Reen, kind of everyone helping in, chipping in to save Reen. Seeing New Class 7 kind of being the ones to bring him back, as his students, where Reen has, lost his way. New Class 7 saving them was good. Crow and Dooley basically joining the squad, Crow coming to his senses again and in a sense paying back his interest with the 50 mirror from Cold Steel 1. The intermission after Act 2 where you had everyone meet up, and oh boy, when you had all three protagonists meet up, I'm pretty sure this moment in Cold Steel 4 was what I was waiting for, the entire series. I wanted all the epic moments and the characters we've met in the past to meet up and just talk and have interest, Harmel with Joshua and Ash, that situation. Jaegers, with Randy and Thea. I'm pretty sure that convo didn't happen. So just so many things that people have overlapped just to talk about it from different games. When can you say this in many other titles where X character from this game and Y character from this game can just talk and just interact? The moment where Reen even apologizes to Lloyd for everything, and Lloyd's no biggie, man, and then they're all good, man. There's some really good moments. This moment, and for me was really, really good. I think that's all I can say, really. Just so many interactions after, and I enjoyed talking about everything. I would say for me, the music in this game is a lot better than Cold Steel 3. I think there are some tracks that, if I can try and remember off the top of my head, that were just good as well. So let's see, I think the opening was good. Low-key, some of the combat tracks such as Seductive Shudder, Mighty Urge even, I think they're pretty good. They're not that bad. And I think obviously To the Future, that's a good track as well, OST. Solid job I think here in Cold Steel 4. Now in terms of why this is an S tier, because I feel like if I talked about all these high points, this title should be S tier, right? Like it should be peak of the peak. Now, I think initially when I finished the game, I thought like, yes, this game was great, but after kind of replaying it once and kind of thinking about the thoughts, I actually really did not like Act 2. I think the reason why I didn't really think about it the first time was in Act 2, I was again trying to just get to the main plot, you know? In Cold Steel 4 now, you know, with the Great Twilight happening, war is happening between Erebony and Calvard. I'm just like, just get me to the story. Get me to the part where like we save Rean. Get me to the part where we save the world. Get me to the part, you know, where we work with Lloyd and Estelle. Like I just wanted to get to those juicy points. And in Act 2, you know, where we started saving people from quote unquote potential problems, yeah, that bit was just so slow. I really could not appreciate that part again. And for me, just the story didn't feel right. You know, the world is meant to end, a war is starting, and we're out here saving people that don't really need to be saved. That's just kind of my general, you know, negative point about Cold Steel 4. If it wasn't for like that, I mean, and even after that, where we do have to fight the trials, you know, and the shrines again, that was a little bit better. But again, some of it did feel a bit forced, like the one with Elisa and her classmates, and then the whole George. It was a bit iffy in my opinion. Like I didn't hate it, but I think it could have been done a bit better. I think Cold Steel 4 for me had a lot of potential, and it didn't live up, at least in general. The high points are really good though, I will say that. I'll talk about the finale again because I think it's worth talking about since it was really good. You know, the fight against Osborn and kind of coming to the realization that Osborn isn't kind of like the true enemy, and in fact he's like a good guy. I think Osborn's story, which I probably should have talked about, was really underrated. He is such an impactful person since you learn about him in Sky Third and even in the Crossbow duology, and you see him how strong of a person he is, and in terms of dealing with Ishmelga, and how similar he's kind of like to Rean. And in the end, Rean was the one to quote unquote do what Osborn couldn't do, and you know, in a sense, save the world again. I do wish in the finale that the cameos, you know, of Lloyd and Estelle, etc., that they had a little bit more of a spotlight, not only in the finale in the game, but I do get it that, you know, it's a Cold Steel game. You know, Rean and Co needs to be the main spotlight. They needs to be the one finishing it. And yeah, I think again, Cold Steel 4, ups and downs, some similar gripes to Cold Steel 2, but I think still solid enough where I believe it's in A tier. You know what, I might just bump it above Sky Third. I think it's pretty good still, don't get me wrong, but I do wish that some of the story and pacing were a little bit different. Okay, so now we're moving on to Trails into Reverie, and this might be a surprise to a lot of you guys, but this one is no, I'm just kidding. This one is bang 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 rank 1. This is without a doubt my favorite game in the Trails series. It's not even close. I think if I had, you know what, just because I can, let's add a row above the GOAT. This one, let's give it its own color. It's blue. Trails into Reverie for me is by far for me my favorite game. I really can't pick a downside in this. Let's go. The route system, all 3 routes were really good. I will say Lloyd's may look a little bit flat, but that's because I think the other 2 were just so much better. I will talk briefly, like, you know, the Lloyd's route is not interesting, but I think it does serve a purpose. Kind of not only the SSS, but Crossbow was realizing, you know, the SSS are just normal dudes. You know, Lloyd, everyone, like, you know, Ellie, Tio, Randy, Risha, Wazi, Noel, to an extent, they're just normal people, you know. You know, Crossbow can't just rely on them to be saving, you know, Crossbow from every situation, even though they happen to have. They just happen to be, in my opinion, in the right place at the right time to do so, you know. And I think it's a very good story about the SSS, you know, refinding themselves and, you know, learning that whilst the other routes take place. So yeah, in terms of Reen's route, I really liked it a lot. Reen became a peak MC character in this game, where he finally learns, finally learns to be happy himself and not just sacrifice himself, in a sense, for everyone else. Even though I felt like that should have been resolved in Cold Steel 4. Reen gets some really cool moments in the game. My favorites, like in him in Nord when he summons Turfing S. Like, I don't know, that was just cool, man. Like, how does that happen, and obviously the final boss where he ends up bringing back the Divine Knights. I mean, it's just classic cheesy Reen. Like, what can you say, man? Reen's that dude, man. He is him. And let's talk about my favorite route, and for most people, their favorite route is the C route, which I'm gonna spoil. And if you haven't played Reverie, this is your last chance. The Rufus, his route was really refreshing, I think. I would say I liked the cast members or the party members Rufus had. They have a very common theme where they all kind of had like a bad past or like history, and they kind of want to be do better. He had Ren, where she kind of was in Ouroboros, she could argue, and slaughtering enemies as the Angel of Slaughter. You then had Duva Lee, where she in Cold Steel 4 joined the gang because she felt like what she did in Cold Steel 3 was wrong, or didn't like it, even though she's loyal to Arianrod. And then you had Arios who joined, who again, what he did in Azure and how he helped the villains, you could argue, was for his selfish sake, because he believed, again, like Crossbell needs this power in order to be safe, so nothing else bad happens. I think Rufus, as a result of this route, him as a character, like, I didn't care about him in the rest of the Cold Steel games. Like, I mean, he had a cool moment in Cold Steel 4 with Arianrod, but in this game he obviously wants to like do a bit better himself, but he is still like himself in a sense. He's not changed, he's not a goody two shoes. He still does actions and think that will benefit him. He's still Rufus to an extent, but not trying to end the world in a sense, which was really cool. And the interaction with him, Nadia, Swin, and Lapis was just really good. It's definitely refreshing to kind of not see the super good guys. Rufus is kind of, when he says, you gotta let the heroes, get that spotlight. They're the ones that are heroes. They're not the heroes. The whole gang of Siri, which I think was a really cool dynamic between all three. And I just loved it. You're just seeing different parties, different point of views as the story was all happening at the same time. Really like the route system. Like, I'm really happy that they've done it and end up eventually using it more. I will say in Reverie, again, I think not many people love the OST, but I really like the OST in this game. I'm trying to think of tracks, like the battle themes. They're really good, since they were kind of trying to call back or have that similar, what's the word, kind of like melodic feel to like their respective games. Lloyd, I love Lloyd's theme. It does sound like a mix of Zero and Azure's battle theme, and I think Reen's route, it does sound kind of similar to Cold Steel 4's battle theme, and then Rufus obviously gets his own. I would say, again, another favorite part of Reverie is the corridor itself, the Reverie corridor. Like, I think if they did this like sandbox thing very well, you really get to just play who you want, whatever team. There's so many like post-battle interaction dialogue, mini games. They brought back the card games that you can play, trivia, and so much more that I don't know, you can just spend hours in there. And obviously then there was the post-game story regarding the Reverie corridor, and I think this was a really perfect epilogue, like really good goodbye to everyone. And of course, I can't forget like the memories. I think they're called, all the the additional stories, like the Doors in the Sky Third. Again, the finale in this game was really good, where like it was like Marvel. Everyone's here to come and just pitch in. And even though a slight downside is that there's too many people here, everyone wants to speak. I think it's just really cool just seeing everyone here, like the entire gang. you could argue in here, just for like one last fight. And honestly, this is what I wished CS4 was gonna be like and hoped it was. So I'm really glad that Reverie is what it is, as it's my favorite game. Like I just love playing it. Like, you know, the sea reveal, and not only that, but it also like foreshadows stuff and connects the bridge to Calvard. And I just really liked Reverie. Like when I first played it, it was so good. I just wanted more. Like I'm in a sense a bit sad that the story was on the shorter side, but I spent so many hours in Reverie. It was honestly my favorite game, and why it's in its own tier for me. It is the GOAT. For me, the greatest game. Everything from the past just combined, you know, like the whole Ishmael Green, because of what's the word? You know, the veins and the I forgot what it's called, but the singularity. Yes, that's it. And even Reen seeing Ishmael Green for the first time and fighting, and him realizing like you know, that's what he would have become if he wasn't lucky and you know, got that true ending in Cold Steel 4. And it's just so much, man. I could just go on for days about Reverie, but I think you kind of get the point for me. Reverie is good. That gameplay's fun. The music's great. I really love the story. Yeah, that's why it's, for me, my favorite game of all time. Okay, so next on the tier list we have is Trails Through Daybreak. Now, for me, this one is going at the bottom of S tier as it sneaks its way in. Really solid entry for a new arc, and especially considering that you could argue that this is meant to be kind of an intro setup game like Zero and First Chapter. I would say visually everything looks better with the new engine that they've introduced at Falcon. And I think for me, one of the biggest highlights for why this game is really solid is Van as a protagonist. I think he's just very different compared to what we've had. You know, he is someone with experience. You know, Estelle, again, junior racer, you know, teenager in a sense, loud, you could argue, a bit wild, a bit reckless. And then we see her mature in SC. In Crossbell, we had Lloyd, again, fresh detective out of school, as he kind of works his way up. And, you know, he has no powers or anything, and he's just trying his best out there to get over those barriers. And then we had Reen, you know, he's a student. He was born with a power that he never really asked or wanted, you could say, and we see him develop as he grows. And then we land with Van. We kind of skip that initial phase, and we kind of are placed in a spot where, you know, he has his own business. He has been through stuff. He has, you know, a lot of experience, and you can see that when he kind of interacts with his younger, like, aged assistants, you know, with Agnes, Ferry, Harren to an extent. And even though he is meant to be kind of that more slightly mature figure, he still kind of acts sometimes like a teenager when it comes to certain stuff. So yeah, I think Van really fresh breath of air. Yeah, something like that when it comes to a protagonist. Now, I will say the pacing for this game was really good. I think we get off straight to a bang. Literally, someone does end up dying. We you know, really discover the Grendel. Chapter 1, again, we don't stop there. You know, we already have stuff that happens, quite, you know, some serious topics as well. I say we get to see some, because of that, we see a lot of decent character development as well, and we definitely see kind of that experience size from Van. I think the cast size feels pretty solid, and they do feel kind of like a tight-knit group, you know, kind of like the Crossbell arc, in my opinion. I think they did a better job with this cast than Old Class 7, in my opinion. Another reason why Daybreak 1 goes up here, I think the gameplay choices were really solid. I didn't talk much about gameplay, I think, in some of the previous ones, because I don't think they interested me that much, but I think what they did in Daybreak was really good. I want to talk about where they brought back the, in a sense, the old court system like they did from Sky and Crossbell into the now Shard skill system. In a sense, you could argue that they've combined some complexity and simplicity from previous variation of the court system, like the Cold Steel ones, where you can just plonk whatever art you want. and then you also have like the formula where you kind of match the elements to match what you want. They introduce kind of the hybrid combat system where you're turn-based and you have the action kind of part. I really enjoyed this. Sometimes I just can't be bothered to think on the spot, and especially with kind of like the smaller mobs and monsters roaming around the dungeons, I can kind of just whack them up with a bit of combat. I can either go full action, which would, I think, least effort, just roll around, smack them up, or I can stun them and just again end them pretty fast. I think is really good introduction here. The alignment system is cool. I like how it affects different parts of quests, get different options and choices, and then it gives that some potential replayability in chapter 5, and again explore a bunch of different options and you kind of get to play as that role, like similar when you play Crossbow, that detective role, kind of Van's role or job in this game. And I think I want to point out, I think, is that the villains here in this game were really good, just like pure evil, man. Like, that's great. I think in the past we had Ouroboros sometimes, and they're like a mysterious group, for which to me, I believe they're not evil. They just have a different perspective, or they know something that we don't. They're trying to achieve something, but they're not necessarily like evil compared to our martyr here, which I think is a good change of pace. Really solid music choices as well, I think, in this game. And to pretty much close it off, I think this game is just generally a really solid package overall. Everything is really good, and I think as a result it does set a high bar for me for Calvard, which is why I like to put this at the S tier. I think, again, really good job by Falcon. This game is a banger. Next up is Trails Through Daybreak 2. Now, you may wonder why I have this C tier when nothing goes there. But sadly for me, Trails Through Daybreak 2 hit the C tier. This one's gonna need a lot of explaining, I think. Again, I know in the community that this game is either, again, a very coin flip one. People kind of either like it or they don't. For me, I didn't like it, and it might not necessarily be due to reasons that you think it is. I will say this really all stems from me beating Daybreak 1, waiting for Daybreak 2, and I was watching the long trailers that Falcon releases to promote and market the game, and when I watched that, I thought Daybreak 2 was going to be peak, like Reverie peak, like Azure peak. This game was going to be the best of all time. This was, again, purely just from my speculations of the trailer, but what it turned out to be something was completely different from what I witnessed from the trailer. Now, I didn't want to rant too much about it, but if I was to explain it when I watched the trailer, again, this will be major spoilers, so again, if you have played Daybreak 2, stay away. The trailer starts off with, obviously, the Red Grendel, and it goes to a little point where it's like, I think people were kind of wondering who this Red Grendel was, and it's kind of started to say, or shift the blame that Van might be related, because he also, I guess, has a Grendel. And then it moves to the point where, like, Elaine is like, okay, I'll be there to help you, like, defend yourself, sort of vibe, and we'll figure out what's going on. They go around, and then obviously you have that part where they fight the Red Grendel, and obviously Elaine dies, then Van dies, and then the time shift happens, and it all then switches to kind of like a bunch of people hunting Van down, from Kasim to the people from the churches, not the Dominions, the other group, which I forgot. And in my sense, it felt like, okay, this game is revolved around this Red Grendel that for some reason people are accusing Van for, because they were saying like, oh, Van, you're now a heretic, we gotta hunt you down. I'm like, why is everyone going for Van all of a sudden? So I thought it would be this epic story of Van is kind of on the go, like defending himself against all these people, sort of plot line, which eventually he he defends his name or something in the end. But it turns out all these people are against Van was, again, kind of due to this curse-like feeling. For me, as a result, I just felt like the story kind of, it wasn't great. It wasn't epic for me. And as a result, I felt like this game felt more like a Sky Third Reverie type S game instead of meant instead of being this climax game that you usually have with like SC and Azure, like, you know, great moments from CS2 and 4. Some stuff that happens in there doesn't make much sense or feels like as much relevant. Like, there was a part where just Nadia just disappears all of the game, and then she just then appears near the end to hand Anya's like a Genesis. Like, that for me just felt a bit weird. I will say personally, the time rewind shenanigans, you could say, a little bit cheesy. Like, it made it feel like, oh, the deaths are not impactful because we all know we're just gonna rewind. Some of them were a bit funny, I'm not gonna lie, like the one where you were with Elaine, Nadia, and Swin, and then you rewind a bunch of times. You eventually get Zin to come help you, and I'm like, okay, this is the ending, right? Like, this is the correct path. But no, Zin get clapped, man. Like, bro is like top of the Brazier Guild, and bro is getting clapped. Like, come on, man, I gave you credit in Sky FC, but bro needs Walter to carry him. Like, what is happening here? But I will say, in the end, as a Charles game, there was still really a lot of parts I enjoyed. Still some good story moments in there. I like kind of, even though people don't like Swin and his kind of betrayal, I thought it was somewhat appropriate. We had what else? We have Nemesis Island. I think it was cool. I think it could have been fleshed out a little bit better. I'm not gonna lie, I feel like some of the buildings and facilities, it looked a bit out of place for me. I would say there's a lot of tracks in Daybreak 2 that I really enjoyed. A lot of the combat ones were really good. If I was trying to find some of the titles or name, I like Crimson Sin a lot. I believe that's just the opening. Believing Heart was really good. Do or Die. Again, I think a lot of good ones. For me, I kind of just hope that Kai no Kiseki, again, no, I'm not going to talk about much about it. It's just, I hope Kai makes this game look a lot better in retrospective, and maybe if I replay or after Kai, I'll kind of have a different opinion on this game, because personally, for me, whilst I did still like it, you know, in the end, because I also believe that Daybreak 2, it had the best final boss out of every game. It was so cool. It forces you to do stuff out of comfort, which is cool. And obviously the final like S-Craft moment where like Van basically goes, nah man, Van is him and it's his moment. Really cool stuff as well. So I think it definitely did have potential, but maybe because of my expectations for the game and what I thought the story would be, is the reason why I put this in C tier. But who knows, maybe a few months down the road I will change my opinion. So, but ultimately Daybreak 2 will be a C tier for me. But that's not to say it's bad, it's just that I wish they did a lot more things differently, similar to like Cold Steel 2 and 4, as I wish some things were different. It's just a bit more in Daybreak 2, and it's probably also because I had so much hype and the bar was set so high from Daybreak 1 that for me, I think Daybreak 2 fell a little bit short. That's pretty much it for the tier list. I mean, I have played Nayuta, so I will just plonk it in B. I don't think it's anything special or really great. Like, it was fun. I do know about the potential theories of people saying and linked with, for example, Nayuta himself and the Grandmaster, etc., which I'm not going to go too much into. But yeah, that is the tier list here. So we have Reverie at the top. That's my favorite game of all time. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed that. Let me know if you guys want more tier lists or more kind of discussions and talk. I apologize if this is very rambly. Obviously, I'm not very used to talking and making kind of like yapping content like this. I probably have missed a lot for games, but I don't want to make this too long. So yeah, leave a like and subscribe if you like this sort of stuff, and again, let me know what you guys want to see next. So yeah, see you guys in the next one.